In our previous episode, we saw one of Jacob's daughters, Dinah, getting exploited and kind of defiled. This led to the destruction of the men of the city that performed such an action to her. And here we are today. We are moving on. Genesis 35 and 1. And God said to Jacob, Arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there, and make there an altar to God who appeared to you in a distant manifestation when you fled from the presence of Esau, your brother. Here we go. Jacob gets some new instructions, some new directives by God. He's got to move on to Bethel. He has to make an altar there, an altar to the God, the one who gave him the vision back when he was first running from his brother a couple of chapters ago. So here we go. Genesis 35 and 2. Then Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, Put away the images of strange gods that are among you, and purify yourself and change into fresh garments. So Jacob kind of knows what's going on in his household. Rachel, as we recall before, she stole the gods of Laban, her brother, and brought them with them. These were graven images, and there's probably other graven images that some of the other family members had. They made little statues of animals or personifications of ideals or whatever those graven images are, things that people worshipped or whatever, idols. So he wanted to kind of purge that out of there, get rid of that stuff, get rid of those idols, for he's being called back to the true and living God. So we got to get rid of that. And of course, change into fresh garments, get yourself out of that filthy stuff that you're in and put on new clothes and kind of cleanse yourself. This story is probably not going to apply to everyone, but sometimes you get dirty, whatever, working at something, and if it's your own house, you can do whatever you want. Nobody really cares because it's yours. But if you want to go visit people, go visit like your parents or some relatives or whatever, you want to show up in kind of a presentable manner, right? You don't want to have that filth with you, so you gotta clean up. You gotta get the mud off. You gotta get the dirt off. Go shower, get yourself cleaned up before you go. You don't want to go there just in your own filth. Genesis 35 and 3. Then let us arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make there an altar to God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and was with me wherever I went. Jacob is ready to go. He's like, all right, it's time to go. Let's go to Bethel, and we'll go there. We'll make this altar. And then he's kind of almost like giving a thanks or some sort of dissertation to maybe his household, in the sense that God was with him wherever he went, and God kind of looked after him in his distress. He got out of many sticky situations. Genesis 35 and 4. So they, both young men and women, gave to Jacob all the strange gods that they had, and their earrings which were worn as charms against evil in their ears. And Jacob buried and hid them under the oak near Shechem. So here we go. We got Jacob. He's collecting all the stuff, collecting all these idols and these earrings and these charms, and he's burying them. Burying them that they're done with that crap. They're going to move on, and that's just going to be left behind. So he buries it and they move on, so that way no one can kind of take that stuff with them. Confiscating all that stuff. For what use do they have of these graven images and models of things and charms and whatnot when they have the power of the true and living God? Genesis 35 and 5. And they journeyed, and a terror from God fell on the town round about them, and they did not pursue the sons of Jacob. I don't know, but this might be a reference to that extermination of the previous town where the sons of Jacob kind of wiped them out. That maybe all the neighboring towns, they're like, oh man, we got to get these guys. We got to rescue, the people that they took, the women and the children and the animals and the property that they wanted to, do their own level of justice and kind of do something about that situation. But this terror of the Lord, maybe it was a vision, maybe it was a dream, maybe it was environmental effects, a tornado touched down. It doesn't really matter what it was, but there was a terror, and these people were like, nope, not going that way. We're just going to stay inside and let them pass. We're not going to go out there. We're not going to go meet Jacob. Jacob can just go on his way. We're not even going to think about it because we got all these bad omens going on here, and just none of that. Genesis 35 and 6. So Jacob came to Luz, that is Bethel, which is in the land of Canaan, he and all the people with him. So they went through this journey, they got to their destination, and they didn't leave anyone behind. They all made it there together. Genesis 35 and 7. There he built an altar and called the place El Bethel, God of Bethel, for there God revealed himself to him when he fled the presence of his brother. So there we go. He got directions, he followed them, he obeyed them, he did everything that was kind of needed to be done. Genesis 35 and 8. But Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died and was buried below Bethel under an oak, and the name of it was called Allon Backpha, meaning oak of weeping. Well, they made it there, but then they had a fatality afterwards, and they buried her. Okay. Genesis 35 and 9. And God, in distinct visible manifestation, appeared to Jacob again when he came out of Paddan Arma and declared a blessing on him. So here we go. We got Jacob. He makes this altar. He gets to this place. He gets where he's told to go. He makes this altar, and then he has a revelation of God. God comes and blesses him. What's he going to do? Where's this going? Genesis 35 and 10. Again, God said to him, your name is Jacob, supplanter. You shall not be called Jacob any longer, but Israel shall be your name. So he called him Israel, contender with God. So when he wrestled with God a couple chapters ago, God changed his name from Jacob to Israel, but in what we've read, he hasn't been going by the name Israel yet. So this is God kind of reaffirming that his name is Israel, and he needs to take up the mantle of his new name and no longer be Jacob. Jacob the supplanter. Genesis 35:11. And God said to him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall come from you, and kings shall be born of your stock. 35:12. The land which I gave Abraham and Isaac I will give to you, and your descendants after you I will give the land. So the blessing that Jacob, Israel, is receiving at this juncture in time is that he will become a great and mighty nation, and kings will be born from him. And that he is also inheriting the blessing that was given to Abraham and to his father, Isaac. So this is all wonderful, good things as far as the descendants of Israel goes, the descendants of Jacob. Genesis 35:13. Then God ascended from him in the place where he talked with him. So God has this conversation with him, and then he just kind of floats up and goes away. Genesis 35:14. And Jacob set up a pillar, a monument, in the place where he talked with God. A pillar of stone, and he poured a drink offering on it, and he poured oil on it. I don't necessarily know what a drink offering is, but I have heard that oil is kind of a method of anointing. He's making that kind of like a consecrated thing, an object to kind of devoted to God. Genesis 35:15. And Jacob called the name of the place where God had talked with him Bethel, meaning house of God. So he makes this pillar, does his oil and drink offering, and names the place Bethel, meaning house of God. This is probably a pretty cool location to be in. It was probably quite the experience for him, and I don't know if his followers and his children or whatever were able to see any of this happen, but I'm sure it was quite the event. I have the feeling it was much more of a personal relationship between Jacob and the God Almighty, not necessarily an event with the peanut gallery. I think a lot of times with your relationship with God, it's a personal thing, not a group thing. Genesis 35:16. And they journeyed from Bethel and had but a little way to go to Ephrath, Bethlehem, when Rachel suffered the pains of childbirth and had a hard labor. Genesis 35:17. When she was in hard labor, the midwife said to her, do not be afraid, you shall have this son also. So Rachel's pregnant again, and she's having a child, and this is a very difficult childbirth. And she needs to kind of hold on to make it through this, to make it so that her son is able to survive as well. So this is probably a very intense situation. Genesis 35:18. And her soul was departing, for she died. She called his name Ben-Oni, meaning son of my sorrow. But his father called him Benjamin, meaning son of the right hand. So we have this tragedy of Rachel dying in childbirth to her last and final son. And she wanted to call him Ben-Oni, the son of sorrow, but Jacob, he wasn't having that. He named him Benjamin instead, in a way to almost honor her and her existence and her life, the son of the right hand. How wonderful is that? Genesis 35:19. So Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. It is very sad that Rachel died, but they buried her and they had to move on. Her son survived, and I guess that is a good thing, that it was not all bad, but I'm sure this was a difficult journey to make. Genesis 35:20. And Jacob set a pillar, a monument, on her grave. That is the pillar of Rachel's grave to this day. Genesis 35:21. Then Israel journeyed on and spread his tent on the other side of the Tower of Edar. Well, this is very interesting. Now the text is referring to Jacob as Israel. The name change has now been made after the death of Rachel. I find this incredibly fascinating. If we remember back when they were first leaving the land of Laban, Rachel took the gods with her. And I think, this is just my hypothesis, but when they buried the idols before, just a couple lines ago, that maybe she didn't bury hers, that she was still attached to the idols of the old land, and it was still a part of her. And it was only after her death that Jacob was able to move on and take up the mantle of his new name, Israel. That this marks kind of a shift in his existence, that maybe this is like some level of completion or some sort of milestone for him, that he is now free of the shackles that were binding him to worldliness through Rachel. As we recall too, Rachel was not his first wife. Leah was his first wife. Now, I heard this rabbi, he was saying before that it's like, if you get married and God allows you to get married, that's the person that you're supposed to marry, and you kind of got to roll with it. And Jacob did a terrible job of this. His first wife, Leah, who he was kind of set to marry or whatever, and he did everything to be married to her. But then to kind of dislike her and not want to do anything with her, that's just kind of a rough scenario. And it was probably not something that God really wanted for. God probably was the one that set up that marriage in the first place, that she was kind of who he picked to go with him, right? And then the rest of this is just God kind of accommodating his kind of doing his own thing or whatever. I guess we didn't really have the law at this time that, kind of forbade the polygamy and the whatever. But there was still like that precedent set up in the Garden of Eden with a man to a woman, 1-to-1, right? So there could be something along those lines as well. I'm not as confident on that, but the way that Rachel had those idols, I think there might be something along those lines. And now we finally have our man, Israel. Oh yeah, then he journeyed down and set his tent on the other side of Edar. Okay, picking up where we left off. Genesis 35:22. When Israel dwelt there, Reuben, his eldest son, went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine. And Israel heard about it. Now Jacob's sons were 12. Okay, kind of a lot going on here. So while they're in this dwelling on the Tower of Edar, Reuben, the eldest son, engaged in sexual relations with Bilhah, his father's concubine, so Jacob's concubine. And she was the maid of Rachel. And of course, Jacob, Israel, knows about this, and we'll see if he does anything about this, or maybe a bit later. And now Jacob's sons were 12. At first, when I read this, I thought, they're 12 years old, but that wouldn't make any sense. But there's actually 12 sons, as we'll see. Genesis 35:23. The sons of Leah, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Ishkar, and Zebulun. 35:24. The sons of Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin. Genesis 35:25. The sons of Bilhah, Rachel's maid, and Naphtali. 35:26. The sons of Zilpah, Leah's maid, Gad and Ashtar. These are the sons of Jacob born to him in Padan Aram. And we add those up, and we get to 12. So there we go, 12 sons. Perfect. Genesis 35:27. And Jacob came to Isaac his father at Menor, or Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had sojourned. So this huge journey, it's kind of come full circle. He's making it back home, making it home to go see Isaac, his father, yet again. Genesis 35:28. Now the days of Isaac were 180 years. 35:29. And Isaac's spirit departed. He died and was gathered to his people, being an old man, satisfied and satiated with days. His sons Esau and Jacob buried him. So Isaac was in poor health, and it seemed like he was dying. And Jacob had to leave town because he stole his brother's blessings by shrewd negotiation tactics. And then he dwelt in the land of Abraham's father, right? And met Laban, his mother's brother, and dwelt down there for 7 years, working to get one wife, 7 years for the next. And he's down there quite a while, and then has to leave, and he's making this huge journey back with his whole family in tow. And he manages to eventually get home. He makes it home. And his dad's still alive. And if you go by the dates in this, and later on, I think it's got the death date for Jacob as well. That's kind of another big event that we'll see in the future. And, I mean, his dad lives another 15 years, so he comes back. He's kind of rebuilt his relationship with his brother. And, you know, he sees his dad again, and they're able to do stuff. They're able to do stuff for more years, and is able to kind of repair that relationship. And I think that's just kind of a wonderful thing. You know, here we go. We think he's leaving, or, you know, he thinks he's leaving, and he's never going to see his dad again. His dad's going to, you know, maybe die the next week or whatever it is, and he's just going to not be able to bury his father, not have a proper funeral for his dad because he's kind of in exile. So his brother doesn't kill him. So, you know, he gets to come back, and his dad's still alive, and rebuilds those relationships, and now he's got this wonderful family. It's unfortunate that his you know, his wife's situation, Rachel, not being able to meet her father-in-law or whatever, and yeah, that sucks. She seemed to have died quite young, at least for this time period and age or whatever. Losing one of the maids along the way as well. It's just, they had some deaths, they had some grief there, but they were able to kind of get the family going again, get back into the land, move in the right direction, inherit those blessings. Just wonderful stuff. Israel wrestling with God, wrestling and demanding a blessing and receiving it. How glorious is that? Anyway, that's the end of the chapter, so we'll see where this is going later on.